Good evening, everybody. The time is now 5:05. We had given a few people a few minutes to start, but we will now start now. Firstly, my name is Dr. Ayanda Nteta. I will be hosting the session today. I will be introducing our speaker. I'll also do a little introduction of myself. But as I note that currently we are already live on Facebook, I would like to go through the house rules first before we get into the introductions. So firstly, I'd like to just inform everybody that we are live on Facebook and we will be recording the session for this evening. Secondly, we would request that as those who are joining us through Zoom, if when they join, they could please place their mics on mute, and you're welcome to also to keep your cameras off. If you've got any questions, you can place them in the chat, as I will be monitoring the chat as the moderator with the team from AISCA. And when we begin the presentations, you can also raise your hand. We will note your hand, and then we will take the questions at the end, if Dr. Mashele permits. You may also be those who join us in Zoom. If you're not on mute, we will then be placing you on mute, and so that there's just no interference in terms of background noise coming through, but then you'll be welcome to take yourself on mute when you want to ask questions, which will be at the end. With those house rules out of the way, I'll introduce myself, and I will also then introduce the team that is here, and as well as the guest speaker, who I'm very excited to be moderating today. So my name is Dr. Ayanda Nteta. I'm here representing AISCA, which is the African Institute for Supply Chain Research. And I am the VP for Southern Africa, looking after, as it indicates, there's countries within Southern Africa. AISCA has started a brilliant initiative called the Game Changing series, where we bring in thought leaders, game changers within the supply chain space. And today I'm very honored to be hosting Dr. Faith Mashele, who's going to be sharing with us a discussion, a topic on sustainable procurement and how do we build the new normal. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to Dr. Mashele. She is a WITS PhD graduate, as well as a Gibbs alumni. So as you can see, she's been to the leading institutions, and she got her MBA at Gibbs and her PhD at WITS. Faith is a seasoned chartered procurement and supply chain professional. She actually has an FSIPS with extensive work experience in the field of procurement and supply chain management. In 2019, she became one of 12 South African professionals to be awarded a fellow in FSIPS, which is a fellow within SIPS, a status that's given by SIPS UK, which is really has her as a senior advocate and gives her one of the most prestigious accolades within the SIPS fold. Dr. Faith is also a procurement executive. She's a research supervisor, a scholar, a philanthropist, and a thought leader who continues to share her experience in the procurement and supply chain profession. She will be sharing with us today, as I indicated, how do we build the new normal and looking in terms of sustainable procurement. I do know Dr. Faith personally, so I'm really excited in terms of what she's going to be sharing with us, the thought leadership that she'll be sharing with us, the insights that she'll be sharing with us, and I think we'll be able to take away quite a few nuggets in terms of sustainable procurement. With that, Dr. Faith, I'm going to hand over to you, and I'm really looking forward to spending this evening with you.
Thank you, moderator Dr. Ayanda Nteta. one of the few people that I know that really, really excite me in the field of supply chain. An awesome colleague from the field of ISCA, from also UNISA. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying I am so excited and I really, really am grateful for this opportunity to be speaking to you tonight. When Prof. Ambi approached me, in fact, there's a story that I want to share. When he and I come a long way, and I remember when he had this idea around the Game Changer series, he actually consulted me or contacted me to say, look, can I use it as a sounding board? I have this idea, what do you think? And much as I gave input and we discussed this, I suppose at the back of my mind, I didn't think that I will make it to this platform. But here am I today. When I got the invite, I put up my hand and I said, let me come and share with the community what I am passionate about, which is procurement. For those that know me, I love procurement. I speak procurement. It excites me, and it's something that has really given me a purpose in this life around the work that I do. So before I get into the business of the day, I want to follow all protocol, observe all protocol. Prof. Ambi, as the president of ISCA, greetings to you and thank you again. To the team behind ISCA, I am grateful to be talking tonight. To my family and friends who are here for moral support, I am grateful. To my colleagues from UNISA, from SEBS, colleagues all around in the supply chain community, I'm grateful that you're joining tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am going to share my screen. And how this conversation tonight will go is that it is really about telling a story. Now, telling a story, but then in the same breath, I was very cognizant that the time that we're living in, which is today is day 2 of the lockdown in South Africa. And I want to believe that we all have questions around what is happening during this time. We all have questions around where do we start? And I figured that I don't have the answers. And perhaps it's one of the disclaimers that I need to make tonight to say I don't have the answers, and hence I'm asking the question because I also want to participate in this conversation, in this public discourse, to say, can we perhaps start framing the right questions so that we can start co-creating solutions around this exceptional time that we're living in? So hence my topic tonight is really a question that I'm asking to say, how do we build the new normal? Now, in this conversation, Dr. Yanda did a great job in terms of introducing me. I'll check whether she left anything out, but I think she's covered most of the stuff. I'll also take you through the background, why the topic, why are we talking about, or asking the question tonight. I look at now in research, you always need to frame to say, your topic or the problem statement, whatever that you're posing, where is it taking place? And for me, I'm going to pull from my experiences in procurement in South Africa. I'm going to pull from my experiences as somebody who, when COVID-19 hit, I was in the public sector, and during this lockdown, I'm now in the private sector. So the conversation tonight is going to pull from the experiences from both worlds to say, what do we learn, and what are some of the key takeaways that we can use as we ask and continue to get involved in these robust discussions. Again, because this is a supply chain research, I am expected and I'm obliging to then touching on theoretical framework to say, what are the grounding theories for my topic tonight? Like I said, when I pull from my experiences, I'll use it from a micro level, and then also I'll say, then what does it mean from a macro perspective, and what can we then infer from what we are discussing tonight? Lastly, I want to leave you with the fact that I feel that from the conversation tonight, perhaps instead of looking at it as what do we do in a crisis, perhaps this crisis is an opportune call to action to say, for those of us who are blessed to still be taking part in conversations, blessed to still be in this country, in this time, you know, what are the things that we can use going forward, really? So that's what I would cover. I would also prefer that, as Dr. Nteta mentioned, that I go through my presentation. And if there are any questions, I suppose at the later stage, we'll take the questions and check in the chat if I can answer the questions of the people. And again, because I work and come across many experienced professionals, I'll probably call my colleagues to also help where I cannot answer the questions. I have said I don't have all the answers, but I'll try my best to just get involved in this conversation. So where do we start? I've spoken about the fact that I have fortunately experience in both the public and private sector. So what you're probably going to get tonight is a feel of the best of both worlds. I suppose with the kind of credentials that back me, you can sort of believe the stuff that I talk about tonight. I think I have put my skin in the game and I've got something to back up the conversations that I'm having tonight and why I'm speaking about procurement. Dr. Nteta has also mentioned that I'm a fellow with the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply in South Africa and the SIPS Gauteng branch chairperson. So I'm wearing many hats that also, I suppose, give credence to why I am talking about the subject tonight. But most importantly, I think the passion that I have for procurement is what makes me sit here with you tonight. And then lastly, as one of the women leading women in the country, I had the honor of being recognized by the Southern African Women in Leadership. I think now they're called the Strategic Women in Leadership, where they then had the inaugural Trailblazers Awards in 2020, and I was one of the 30 finalists from SADC who was recognized. So that is something that makes me very proud. So I thought I should share with you tonight. Again, I'm very cognizant that, and again, all those things, most people that know me always wonder, why do I always dress up with this? Should be either African print or beads. And that's because I'm really proud to be a product, you know, an African child. There's so many stories that make up the person that I am tonight. And I thought that as Africans, as an individual that's contributing to supply chain research in Africa, perhaps where we start is starting with an African proverb. I specifically was drawn to this one because I can imagine being in the lockdown. I can imagine the changes that we've had to endure with the new normal. I can imagine the uncertainty. I can imagine the many questions that we have. But when times are like these, sometimes it calls upon us to or it befalls us to go back to our roots, to go back to the learnings, to go back to the sayings of our grandmothers and our forefathers. And there's an African proverb that I thought would be nice to just introduce the topic tonight that says, however long the night, the dawn will always break. And the conversation tonight is really shaped around that, bringing hope, as we ask you these questions, to say we should always remember that there will be dawn if we hang on long enough. I suppose there's so many things that we can ask, there's so many fingers that we can point, there's so many things that should have been done. But I think if we keep hope alive, we will be able to just take it one day at a time. So that's where we start the conversation tonight. Now, how do we build the new normal? So the new normal is really the business unusual circumstances that we find ourselves in since the outbreak of COVID-19. We've seen the unintended consequences of lockdown measures in the country. We've had inevitable shrinkages in the economic activity. How that has now played out on the other side is that there's been negative impact on the job market. We know how there's been budget cuts, reductions, And one of the things that came out, and again, because we work in a space where we deal with suppliers, there's the fact that there's 40% SMEs had been, in fact, SMEs have been hard hit as the supplier market continues to shrink. And last year, I think in 2020, the number was sitting at 40%, and I want to believe that it's gonna go up, or if it's not, slightly higher at this time. Now, with that background, or with that said, we definitely need to adopt or adapt as well to the new norm, and come up with sustainable recovery and business continuity plans for transcending the pandemic. Because much as, I mean, when the lockdown was introduced in March 2020, it was a 21-day period. And I don't know if, like many of people on the call, many people watching tonight, I've lost count of how many days we're into the lockdown, and how we've had to endure. And like I said, in South Africa, we're now on day 2 of what is the third wave of COVID. Now, from let me go back. There we go. I want to remove this at the top, but let's see whether you can see. So this slide here is perhaps gives away by age, or talks about the fact that before there was Google, there was Chappies. Chappies in South Africa is a brand for bubble gum. Many of us grew up loving Chappies for one reason, and maybe it was just me, but I think most of us can relate to the fact that most of the facts that we know today, we learned from the bubblegum wrappers, where there was always information. There was something that you would learn about. Did you know that this is the case? And I thought that if we were to talk about South Africa as an area of study, one of the things that we have to look at in procurement is just to understand what the South African context looks like. Now, South Africa is one of the leading developing economies. We are a pivotal hub for financial resources in Africa. It's been said that we have the most robust inclusive program through broad-based economic empowerment. In 2018, 2017, the spend for public procurement goods and services was estimated around 1.22 trillion. So now, question is, trillion is, there's a lot of zeros there. There's a lot of zeros when we talk about 1.22 trillion. And because there are a lot of zeros, I suppose it is inherent that the issues around ethics, issues around challenges and barriers that are found in our space are prevalent. But I'm not going to touch on that subject tonight, if it's okay, because I want us to talk about how do we still pull out some of these good things that we can get from a space which is public procurement, which accounts for about 30% of GDP, which is the gross domestic product. Now, with that said, what does it mean, and what has COVID-19 done, or what impact has it had on supply chains? Now, according to, and again, because this is academic research, Prof, you should tick me on this one. I hope I'm using the right referencing style. The Harvard review in 2020 highlighted the fact that COVID-19 is a wake-up call for supply chains, extraordinarily because there weren't any metrics that would help us to control or mitigate a pandemic. They were never high on the radar. None of us thought that we would have to evolve or change as much as we've had to. What I also, again, perhaps it's the silver lining in this whole conversation or in this crisis, is that I want to submit to the audience tonight that COVID-19 also highlighted the pivotal role, how important our function as procurement and supply chain is, because when the crisis hit, much as there were COVID task teams, much as there were all these decisions that had to be taken, all of these decisions had to be done with us in the room. So one of the things that I will say about COVID is, as supply chain professionals, yes, there's stories about things that went wrong or what was not supposed to happen, But then it should also be a time where we choose to either, one of two things could happen. We could either go down with the fact that the area of supply chain is corrupt and so many things have gone wrong, or we could rise up as professionals and the supply chain community and say, actually, we want to show that if things are done right, they can work. In fact, one of my favorite quotes, there's a gentleman who was presenting at one of the workshops that we had, and he said, there's always an opportunity to do things right if the right thing is being done in the first place. So I suppose that's the frame that I've adopted to say procurement, if done right, can really yield all these benefits. Procurement, if done right, we can contribute to the changes and the economic recovery that's supposed to happen. But also the negative side to COVID was that we started seeing disruptions in the flow of goods, products and services. It started showing, the cracks started showing that risks and output must be assessed because we deliver and because we contribute to delivery of projects. It is important to understand the risks and supply chain risks in the process. What we also started seeing was there was heavy reliance on suppliers. We had to build reserves. We had to build relations during this time to ensure that the negative impact of turnaround times for delivery was reduced. Now, I spoke about the fact that I'm going to, because I can also wear two hats. When I mean two hats, before this session, of course, I was in my 9-to-5 in practice, but then now I am in a room where I can also wear the academic hat and say, can we draw from theory and say, what are the theories that we can ground this problem or this conversation in? And for me, there were three theories, if it's okay for me to pull them in, just to be able to analyze and fully draw into the experiences of, say, what can we learn from the impact of COVID on supply chains. The first theory in yellow is the institutional theory, which relates to what are the expectations on business practices and behavior. And we'll see how we're able to pin and place some of the recommendations and understanding of how do we build the new normal. The second theory that I thought were also important was to look at the stakeholder theory, which then talks about what is the influence of stakeholders, what is the influence of society, what happens if customers are not happy or suppliers are not able to deliver, what does it mean when government is not able to support or to change legislation, what does it mean if business is not coming to the party. So hence it was important to also ground this conversation in stakeholder theory. And lastly, the last theory that is relevant for this conversation tonight was the resource-based view theory, which talks about how do we acquire and allocate resources, and how do we also understand organizational capabilities that will help us to build a new normal. And from these three theories, I went back and I said, okay, if we look at the institutional theory, the first thing that it will be able to tell us is if we need to have an enabling environment, we need legislation that allows us to do certain things in procurement. Perhaps that's the starting point and something where we can focus and shift and talk about how do we develop and support enabling policies for sustainable procurement. Now, with stakeholder theory, what it pulls or brings to the fore is that it is important to also build favorable partnerships and alliances that will help us to deliver and implement whatever opportunities and recommendations that we're putting forward. And lastly, with the resource-based theory, the question then becomes, how do we unlock access to market? How do we unlock access to resources? And how do we make the space that we operate in inclusive? Now, this picture here, for me, I think it took me back, and I'm about to now go back to where when COVID happened, or COVID, the introduction and the lockdown and everything happened, when the action started, where was I and what was happening in there? And I want to argue that much as the pictures that are on the slide may look familiar, many people don't know that there's a lot of procurement touch, right? Procurement has played an important role in what we see there. And why do I say that? So we start with the picture on the top left of the slide, where now it's become so normal when we go to shops, when we go to conferences or events, when, okay, now the president is, we're not allowed to go to events. So yeah, I'm talking about what we're used to now in the space of COVID, where we have temperature checks. At the time when the lockdown was introduced, I remember I was working for an institution of higher learning. And one of the first things that we had to do was talk about temperature checks. So now the regulations come out and we're supposed to have temperature checks. We had experts in the COVID task team, but we were supporting the COVID task team for them to be able to roll out whatever product, services, whatever was required at the time. Procurement was right in the forefront of it. So I remember, why did I put the thermometer there? It's one thing to see just any other thermometer, but I remember how we had to go back and change, or rather adapt the specifications, because we found that the thermometers that were being procured at the time, some of them, and because we were going into the winter season, some of them were not responding well when the security guards came on. I think they came on board at 6 o'clock. They checked in at 6, and at the time it was still cold, and they argued that the thermometers were not working, you know. Okay. The thermometers that we had procured then were better suited for daytime, and they did not work well during the mornings when it was cold. So yes, you might walk into a shop and see a thermometer, but you don't know that there was a decision where we said, okay, let's go and understand in the market what types of thermometers are available for us to make sure that we respond accordingly. So that's the first picture on the left, where, and again, when people ask me, what is procurement? I always say procurement is about buying. Layman's terms, everybody in this call buys something. We buy shoes, we buy hair. I don't buy hair, fortunately, but everything around me, I mean, what I'm wearing, the beads, the laptop, the headsets, that's essentially procurement. And there is a difference between corporate procurement and personal procurement, because I always say, when it's personal, you can buy whatever thermometer that you need, it doesn't matter. But then when it's corporate, because we need to account, we need to reconcile, we need to be able to respond to audit, there is a certain way in which it's done. So this is the context where the story now is playing out, to say, okay, procurement team, come into the room, we need to buy thermometers, how can we help us, who are the suppliers that can help us in this time. Now with the second picture there, we see lots of sanitizers. I mean, sanitizers are now something that is essential, right? It becomes so important to our day-to-day. But I remember how, when, again, I said when the pandemic or when the lockdown was introduced, the question now becomes, what happens on campus? Should we be buying? What size? How many? Should it be students? Should it be small bottles? Should we be buying stands? Where should we place it? So many decisions that are taking place. As all of these questions are being asked, we are in the room, and we're also trying to make sure that we're buying the correct stuff. Okay, if it's for the students, do we buy sanitizers in bulk? How to make sure that we'll always be able to refill their bottles? So interesting conversations taking place. And sometimes it's so easy now that we're so used to these bottles, or so used to these, now it's become normal, and people don't understand how procurement was really, really important in shaping these conversations and making sure that they happen. The picture on the bottom is now cleaning services. So before COVID, and again, everything was directed by the regulations. If regulations come tomorrow and they're amended and we're told, no, it has to be fogging of classroom, fogging of spaces. There's certain ways in which the cleaning needs to happen. There's certain, I remember we had to buy overalls, we had to buy, many people know PPE as probably the mask and all these other stories that fall behind what we know, and which is something I'm not going to touch on. But it was interesting to now see that even how we source cleaning companies, even what we require from cleaning companies, the certification that goes with it, that was also part of procurement, informing and making sure that we can implement those discussions to say, how do we dispose the material, whatever else that comes, or the waste, I think it's called the waste. How do we dispose waste according to the regulations? Are there safety bins? Are there hygiene? It was actually hygiene bins. Where should they be placed? What can we do? So all of these things, as they're unfolding, we are in the room. And again, I when I was putting this together, I realized how much I've grown as an individual. I mean, before COVID, it was business as usual. We buy anything, but it was interesting to see the shift and the change in how do we adapt to the fact that now circumstances have changed and we need to do things differently. And lastly, the picture on the right talks to the fact that we're now on Zoom, we're having these conversations. But again, before this could become normal, procurement had to be involved in making sure that how many licenses, how many users, how many people have got access to laptops, where do we buy laptops, how do we make sure that we have enough licenses for teams, who's going to support, can they deliver to the houses, do they have to come on site? So it's interesting that what is the right spec, what are the discounts that we can get, what's the best way to procure this, and these are some of, again, I think with this slide, I want to talk to the story around how we were right in the middle of things and how this was also shaping my experience as a professional, my experience as somebody who's buying, to say now things are being done differently. We've never had to think about, for instance, as students, what does it mean for students? What does it mean for researchers? Do they even need the same kind of laptops? So these are some of the conversations and some of the decisions that had to be made. Lessons from practice. Again, I wear a hat of a practitioner and say, okay, so what are some of the lessons that we saw, again, as these decisions were being made? I spoke about the fact that in March 2020, we all thought that we were going into 21-day lockdown. If you had told us that we will be sitting in March going through the lockdown, again, in the third wave, that would have been something that we would have not thought about at the time. But what did we see with this lockdown? I spoke about the fact that procurement and supply chain professionals, let's see if this can go down, there we go. Procurement and supply chain services were declared as part of essential services. At the time, we remember how we had to get permits, we had to get letters, so that we were able to support the COVID task teams. We started seeing the issues of emergency procurement because things could not be done the same way. There was a definite increase in the demand for goods and services. We had to support the work from home policies. I spoke about the fact that we had to procure laptops, software devices, the software and devices, and many other requirements to support the work from home policies. And the fact that there was suddenly supply disruptions. We were told that this supplier has run out of stock because, look, we delayed in getting approval from certain committees, and because of that, our order will only be delivered after 2 weeks. So these are some of the conversations and that we had to manage. If we were to now bring it to, like, come back as procurement committee and say, what did we learn from these experiences? I think one of the things that strongly came out was the need to digitalize our processes to be able to respond quicker. again, tapping into past life, I remember a time where we no longer had the luxury of manual purchase orders that had to be signed. At the time, I remember we had to now start talking to our ERP provider who assisted us to implement electronic purchase requisitions and purchase orders. With that, we saw how we were able to respond quicker. So if an order is placed today, we know that if a requisition is placed today within a certain time, we would commit to making sure that the order's out, the supplier knows, and then delivery takes place. I also remember how we also had to find ways and deal with how do we now start having or briefing our suppliers? How do we brief our bidders during this time? Because then they can't be coming out on site. There's restrictions around numbers of people who are allowed at events or at venues, rather. And we slowly had to also grapple with how do can we even conduct a site briefing? So this is way before we knew that there was Teams or Zoom would really be able to give us an electronic attendance register. You know, there were so many small nuances that we had to take risks. We had to do certain things. You know, sometimes when you've never seen a process unfold, or where you have to act, you know, without there was nothing that we could fall back on. And what a time, because again, I draw back to the fact that it helped us develop as professionals. We had to look at who else is able to support us to be on this end, and how do we conduct virtual site briefings. We had to also deal with the fact that we can no longer receive bid responses manually. And it also became important that we use our analytics for reporting and visibility to be able to understand how many items do we have on site, how much is it worth. So analytics also then started becoming a strong force with the new normal. The next thing that we saw was we had to make sure that we have an enabling environment. We started noticing how it was important for suppliers would say, look, that order is too big. You're expecting me to deliver 5,000 masks by Wednesday. I don't have that kind of cash with me. So the question becomes, do we pay upfront? Does the policy even allow us to do that? Or perhaps were we able to shorten payment cycles for suppliers? How do we lessen the burden of cash flow? And was there a need to also adapt and review our policies to be able to cater for the new norm? And one of the last key principle that I want to talk to was that came out from this was the importance of building strategic alliances. I spoke about the fact that there was a shortage in supplies, and we had to make sure that we are able to build relationships where there's and confirm, or rather ensure that there are alternative sources of supply. So if supply A is not able to deliver because 5,000 masks are a lot, can we perhaps ask supply A to deliver 3,000 and then source other 2,000 from others? Because we needed to respond very swiftly, and we had to take decisions. And one of the things that was important is, how do we build strategic alliances during this time? We had to make sure that we improve customer experience. Again, I spoke about the work from home policies. What does it mean? And one of the things that also came out for me personally was, and again, perhaps I'm using this because I'm a doctor, is to say it is important to listen first and prescribe later. Why do I talk about that? Sometimes when we're coming up with solutions, we always come from a view or a point where we think it will work for other people. Now, if it's for other people, perhaps it might help if we listen to them and make sure that, even though I'm experienced, and I always talk about the fact that I'm not an expert in engineering, for instance, but what I know for sure, when I get into any room, I'm an expert in procurement. I speak procurement. So as I speak procurement, how do I make sure that I'm also able to listen to the engineering view so that I can cater for that, and I am able to respond to what the engineering side of things is able to do. So that's one of the things that was coming there. So on the slide, I talk about the recommendations. What are the recommendations that are coming from here? Again, I want to use the theories as a pillar for for now shaping and saying what are the sort of things that we learned as I'm telling the story. So from an institutional theory perspective, I think that's where we are able to look at policies for sustainable supply chains. From the stakeholder theories I talked about, because this talks to partnerships, or talks to stakeholders, talks to customers, suppliers, government, all the other stakeholders that are able to help us. The stakeholder theory really now highlights the issue around partnerships and perhaps capacity programs. How do we tap into capacity programs that can help us to deliver on sustainable procurement? And lastly, the resource-based view theory talks about the fact that how do we implement practices that will unlock resources and that will allow us to become more inclusive and responsive as supply chain practitioners. So one of the recommendations that I'm submitting tonight is, yes, enabling policies is one thing, or supporting enabling policies is from a, and again, if I wear the hat of somebody in the public sector space, although the same thing really applies, one can argue that it applies also in the private sector, is how important it is for us to refine selection thresholds. I know that the issue around the Public Procurement Act, how do we refine selection theory thresholds and qualification criteria that will help us, and be very clear to say, what do we mean if we're saying, if we want to, for instance, go a targeted route, what is the qualification criteria so clear? Because again, procurement is a very controversial space and an area that's very prone to litigation. So whatever that we do, and the fact that I spoke about accountability, that we should always be able to account for our processes, we should be able to have policies that support us and that are very clear, because so then there is no gray area to say, was this the right qualification area, criteria, or were we supposed to use something else? The second recommendation that I'm submitting to the audience tonight is, from a stakeholder theory perspective, building favorable partnerships and alliances. I spoke about the fact that when we're designing solutions, we need to be able to design with the customer in mind. We need to be able to listen and prescribe later. Most times we find that particularly if you look at supply development programs, we're very quick to prescribe training and say, yeah, maybe if we train these suppliers, suppliers will be fine. But then you find that at the core, if you were to listen, perhaps the one thing that I needed was just to be introduced to a partner, or I needed, the SME needed finance. So here I'm submitting to the audience tonight that under stakeholder theory, one of the most important things, and again, a building block to sustainable procurement, or for sustainable procurement rather, is making sure there's technical and non-technical support that speak to the issues at hand. When we're talking COVID, the impact of COVID and the effect on the burden on cash flows, perhaps the one change that we need to do, or what we need to support there, is around paying early. So again, whatever technical or non-technical support that is offered to our suppliers, it has to be relevant to the issues and whatever that they need. Then lastly, we talked to resource-based view theory, where I was arguing that we need to make sure that the practices, our procurement practices, are inclusive. Our procurement practices need to be very responsive as well. I'm arguing there that when we using the resource-based view theory, we're able to position ourselves and talk about how do we unlock resources through inclusive practices, and also talking about the fact that targeted procurement would always be one of those mechanisms that we can use to increase participation and also increase market access for SMEs. I mean, we cannot continue talking about, I remember a time where, and again, maybe because I've been in the game for a long time, there was a time where we would use set-asides. And then there was a period where there was a gray area to say, no, set-asides are not allowed, so this is how we should do it. But I mean, if we are able to be, because of this current context where we cannot continue doing things the usual way. Perhaps one of the things that we can use to increase participation is how do we go and we target and we craft the right programs that will able to make us deliver and unlock market access for SMEs. Now, in closing, I spoke about the fact that every crisis, there is an opportunity to grow, there is an opportunity to learn new things. And for me, through this conversation tonight, I'm arguing that this crisis is also an opportune call to action to us as the supply chain community, to us as society, to us as business. This is an opportune call for us to rise and make sure that we transcend the pandemic. One of the things that I'm putting forward tonight is there must be a balance between compliance and efficiencies. Now, I talk about this from a context of a procurement perspective where many people will always talk about the black and white in procurement. So procurement is usually an area that is synonymous with red tape. However, again, the context is compliance will always be necessary. Compliance should be done in a certain way, and it should never be a bottleneck to us delivering. So I'm putting forward that there must be a balance between compliance and efficiencies. And I don't think I would be doing justice if I don't speak to the fact that one of the things that we need to see, again, going back to what we know about emergency procurement in our country, is the importance of promoting ethical and compliant procurement practices. The second batch of recommendations that I'm putting tonight is we need to be flexible around how we provide or execute procurement. I spoke about the fact that it's very important for us to be inclusive in how we execute procurement. And tonight I'm arguing, or maybe submitting to you, audience tonight, to say the one size fits all approach does not work. It may actually have unintended consequences. What do I mean by that? I used to make this example by talking about SAA, but I've just remembered tonight, I don't know if I want to use SAA, but let's see how that goes. So if I was, no, let me find another example because I don't want to get into trouble. If I was talking to somebody who's buying shoes and somebody who's buying a bottle of water, I cannot use the same rules, even though the principles are the same. We're going to buy water, we're going to buy shoes. Now with water, the question becomes, there is a commodity that I can get on the shelf. I can walk out of here and maybe the next shop that I see, I'll be able to buy water. It doesn't matter which brand. I need to drink water because I'm thirsty. So the kind of the kind of approach, if it doesn't have to be as rigorous as if I was buying shoes. Again, because I'm wearing a red outfit tonight, I will not just go out and buy green shoes. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So the flexibility comes into play. I know I'm using maybe perhaps simplistic examples, but then the fun about procurement is the simpler we make it, the better that people can get it. So if I was, like I said, with shoes or versus rather with water, I can go to any store and buy water from a fridge and be able to quench my thirst. But then with shoes, I need to understand, does it have to have a certain shade of red? It doesn't have to be just any red that if I walk out, hey, no, I can get this. No. Does it have to be a certain kind of red? Does it have to be leather? Does it have to be a wool? Okay, I don't know why I would wear wool shoes, maybe because it's cold. But then there is a certain kind of rigor that is applied when you are buying a certain product. And again, because of the nature of what you're buying. It's also about the nature of where you're buying it from. And hence I'm saying, perhaps tonight we need to ask ourselves, should we be applying a one-size-fits approach to everything that we do in procurement, or should we really be trying to be flexible in how we do our procurement? I'm also putting now from a macro level, talking about the fact that it is important to differentiate and classify rules according to organizations. Now, this comes from the conversation in the public when we were talking about the Public Procurement Act, to say, should we be just putting the same set of rules for all organizations, or would there be perhaps benefit in us classifying and understanding that for certain types of organizations, this might not always work? Does it mean that we always need to be advertising tenders for 14 days? I don't know what the period is now. Or does it mean that we could look for other ways, because if we put it in the act that it must be at a minimum for 14 days, and now we get into COVID and we can't do it for 14 days, and now the Auditor General comes and says, you did not, and becomes an audit finding, should we be perhaps not looking at, or should we be perhaps looking at things differently? And then lastly, again, because of the passion and again, also because of the understanding that in this current context, if we leave our SMEs behind, if we leave behind our people, because we are a people, when we're talking Africa, we are a people. So we should not be leaving our people behind during this time. And because we've seen the fact that I started by saying that during this time, SMEs have been hard hit. The impact has been felt. I mean, if you go further into research around women-owned entities, even goes to the fact that women have been the hardest hit when it comes to COVID. So I'm putting forward tonight and submitting that we should be thinking about, as we navigate through this new normal, it is important that we also accelerate participation by SMEs and designated groups. I want to close by this quote and perhaps food for thought. Remember, I said in the beginning, I don't have the solutions, but what I'm offering tonight is just based on experience to say, how do I then also contribute to this conversation? How do I also contribute to this discourse where we're trying to find solutions and co-create together? I want to leave you tonight with a thought. This quote comes from Kwame Nkrumah. I looked at and again because I was battling to say which is the right one that will just leave and maybe perhaps just position the message tonight. The quote that I want to leave you with is Kwame Nkrumah said, "Countrymen, the task ahead is great indeed, and heavy is the responsibility, and yet it is a noble and a glorious challenge, a challenge which calls for the courage to dream, the courage to believe, the courage to dare, the courage to do, the courage to envision, the courage to fight, the courage to work, the courage to achieve the highest excellencies and the fullness, greatness of men. Dare we ask for more in life?" Thank you. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Faith. Really insightful in terms of giving us really practical things that we can consider as we try and move into more sustainable procurement, and how do we then build that new normal. I really liked that you were able to bring in your industry experience and share with us how you navigated through and took your organization to the next level. And it really sounds like you were really a procurement partner, a business partner, rather than the traditional procurement back office role, which is really important when we need to see how do we take our organizations to be more sustainable and through procurement being more sustainable. There are some questions in the chat, which is expected really because of your insights in your presentation. So before I even ask some of my questions, I want to give an opportunity to just take one or two questions that are in the chat. But I'd also like to give the participants the opportunity that you can just raise your hand, and then we can also take your questions from there. So whilst you're still thinking about your question, to raise your hand, I will take a few questions from the chat. So one of the questions that came through was talking in terms of procurement and looking at it from the carbon credits aspects. And Dolly Mafa asks a question in terms of, do you think that we can now illustrate the fact that sustainable procurement has an ability to reduce carbon emissions and how. And I think she really asked that question at the point when you were talking about us moving now back to the virtual meetings, etc. And that is when the question came out. But she was really asking in terms of how, do you think that we can now illustrate the fact that sustainable procurement has an ability to reduce carbon emissions?
Dolly, you're the cat that drank all the milk, asking me the tough questions. But let me try to go back to, I think what I didn't talk about, or because, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about here, Dolly. You asked a great question around sustainable procurement and the ability to reduce carbon emissions. If we go back to, you remember that there's a slide where I use the stakeholder theory. So really your question can be placed with the stakeholder theory that talks about the fact that I spoke about business, society, and the environment. So if you think about the, I'm trying to think what is the technical term here, Dolly, but this is where you have society, environment, and what's the third one? Society, environment.
I've taken a blank.
but this is, but in the stakeholder theory, definitely that's where you find the aspect around the environment. And yes, to your question, I think that we can illustrate. In fact, I urge you to perhaps find my PhD thesis, because I wrote on sustainable procurement, and there is an element that talks to in the environment and how we can reduce carbon emissions. I mean, when I think about procurement, again, this is a while back. I was working for, should I be name dropping? I was working for CETA at the time, Dolly. And I remember at the canteen, we had to buy, this is long before the straws, you know, those straws that we don't like, the ones that get, after when they get wet, if they don't do the right thing. So I remember we had to support the canteen at the time to talk about how do we get environmentally friendly products into the canteen. Should we be talking foam? Should we be talking disposables? You know, so and when you now take it further in sustainable procurement, there's an area of responsible procurement. That way it talks about, as we move into making sure that now we're more digital, and then we reduce our carbon footprint. I'm actually thinking about one of the initiatives that we have at my current workplace is linking it to the Sustainable Development Goals. So now this conversation links into those Sustainable Development Goals, and our contribution as a division, and I see some of my colleagues on the call. Our contribution there is the reduction of water, right? How do we reduce water? How do we make sure that we contribute to that sustainable development goal? And one of the things that procurement has supported this initiative by is introducing those fancy toilets where, and I call them fancy, right? Where they've got lids that use a certain amount of water. You know, these are some of the practical things where we're talking about making sure that we do our bit in sustainable procurement. Dolly, I hope I have answered your questions.
Thank you for that.
Okay, yeah. So I have just remembered the three elements, Dolly, for sustainable for stakeholders is the economy, the environment, and now it escapes me the third one.
That's fine, Doc. We'll come back to it, because I can see quite a few other questions that are coming in.
Okay, cool.
Dolly actually had two questions, but I'm going to come back to a second question because I'd like to give others an opportunity.
Okay.
Kabile asked a question in terms of, can a procurement consortium increase buying power for SMEs, and how best can it be adopted?
Kabile. So I suppose the context would be, what do you mean by procurement consortium? Perhaps I was fortunate enough, I had a conversation this morning with a company that actually, in fact, I think past 2 days, you do find organizations where they then come together and act as a, what is the word again? Like a cooperative. So maybe if we place your question as procurement consortium, at a high level, you have one player that now decides to pull all of these SMEs into one room and says, we are representing these, and this is the kind of procurement, I suppose, that you find in where you have social projects, right? Or when you go, or maybe community projects, where you say this one consortium is made up of 60 SMEs who are in the building space. Some are painters, some are builders, some are these things. And then so your question is, can they increase buying power? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes, but there is literature around how that kind of procurement is done, and what are some of the contract considerations. How do we then make sure? And then again, as people who sit on the other side, the question becomes, when a consortium is tendering, do we consider the subcontractors? All of these, I suppose, partnership models in terms of making sure that we can increase buying power. So the question is the answer to that question is yes. There's a way in which you do it, and there is literature that talks to the how it is done.
Thanks for that. One of the areas that you slightly touched on was to do with the roles and responsibilities of procurement personnel in terms of skills. So Sandra is now asking in terms of what roles do you see procurement / supply chain evolving to, and how can procurement professionals equip themselves so we don't lag behind?
Oh, great question, Sandra. So yeah, I know Sandra very well. So Sandra is my colleague at the SIPS Gauteng branch. So Sandra, I think in terms of, we're probably moving away from a role-based approach of looking at the workplace. So for instance, where traditionally we would have a procurement team, and you have somebody who speaks procurement, we're now actually seeing we're evolving into a space where we have to use our skills. For instance, where you as a procurement, so as a procurement professional, you now need to think about a skills base. I think we're moving more into a skills based economy. So where you're saying, I have negotiating skills, can I perhaps piggyback or maybe support a deal making team, right? Because of my negotiation skills, and not necessarily because I speak procurement. How do I come into the room and talk about the fact that I am a procurement professional who has got experience in accounting, or who can speak accounting, and let me come into the room and talk about the numbers and how the suppliers are doing. So I think that we probably are going to move away from a role where you have a procurement person, but more into a world that talks about what kind of skills are you able to bring into the room. Because one of the things that we have as procurement, what I also, I'm glad as I was talking about these experiences, is the fact that becoming a trusted partner, you go into a room and say, I don't necessarily speak engineering, but I can tell you that if we have to go to the market, the chances are this is how it's going to happen. So we're probably moving away from a role to a more skills-based approach. And as procurement professionals, maybe that's the focus where we start now saying, what are the skills that I'm bringing to the room? Because if tomorrow, there's actually, you reminded me of a conversation, Sandra, where somebody was saying, think of it, I mean, people can buy online. Do we need a procurement department? Where do we sit as procurement? I mean, we sit and we say we can interpret. No. Do we need a procurement environment department? And when not, Dr. Faith, because you can write policies, can you go and sit in with the sustainability team and advise them on sustainability, because you can speak sustainable procurement? So it's just that being able to move and say, what do I have, and how can I adapt it to the new normal so that I also become relevant?
Thank you for that. I'm going to give Godfrey an opportunity to take himself off the mic and ask his question before I go back to the chats. Godfrey?
Hey, Dr. Ayanda, thank you very much. Dr. Faith,
Hello.
to have you, and it's always a pleasure to listen to you all the time, Dr. Faith.
Thank you, Godfrey.
Faith, I joined slightly late because I didn't hear you when you started, but there's something, the statement that you mentioned that is so profound to me. I'm talking here from a public sector point of view. You indicated that perhaps we need to listen before regulating, and I think that is profound. You know, in this point in time in public sector, many a times you find them regulating all sectors or all entities in a one-size-fits-all situation, whereby you find that at the end of the time, when auditors comes in terms of different operations that we are sitting in, we find ourselves really wanting in most time and answering to the auditors, where I think perhaps the regulator is supposed to really listen to a different entities as to what is it that they provide to the services of the country, so that when they regulate after they have listened to what we are really doing. But my question is, what can we do to inform the regulators to say perhaps they need to regulate us after they have listened to us, after we have got an input to that, so that we are in the same page. Whenever we are being audited on the same provision that I think it affects all us, and it also touches our operations, rather than being audited in a one size fits all, where sometimes it really does not make sense in different operations. Doctor, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Godfrey. So, Godfrey, one of the things that I can talk to, and listening to you, again, I don't have all the answers, but what I have learned, and again from my experience, is we need to be active in our field. I know you're part of SIPS. I know you put your hand up, but we need to be active so that sometimes you get into rooms where these decisions are being made, you know, and you, when there is, for instance, there is what is it? The Public Procurement Act was out for comments. We can't sit on the sidelines and say, okay, the act is out. Okay, maybe they're going to take a decision. When it's out for public comment, put in that comment. How do we, it's perhaps not just my comment, but which other people can I team up with? Maybe I can put my comment as part of ISCA and join that voice that ISCA is saying, but this does not work for us as procurement professionals. Then jump into another bandwagon where SIPS Gauteng is talking about what are the comments for the Public Procurement Act. Put that same comment there, you know, and when it goes to your organization as well, Godfrey, put that comment. So my advice there is, yes, the regulator perhaps may act that I wasn't aware. You know, they can say that they were not aware. Yes, we can have a conversation whether that's true or right. But then we have to be active. We have to use our voices. We have to participate in these conversations. We have to put our hand up and maybe somebody, maybe the regulator is listening, who knows, to this conversation. Maybe it strikes something and it changes. You know, that one, again, we may not have the answers, but use your voice to be able to support the profession. Use your voice to be able to support changes, because you've been there, Godfrey, you've been there where you receive that audit finding and you know, but no, but this was not correct, right? So this is why I urge everybody to say, let's put our hands up so that we can use our experiences to be able to inform change. I think that time of just sitting on the sidelines, for all you know, Dr. Nteta knows it's going to have another conversations tomorrow with the regulator. Make sure that we use us as sounding boards. You may never know, we might get that right audience we're able to influence.
Thank you for that. And I think just leading on to Godfrey's question, Bennett is asking, like, do you think that within the current legislative framework of the public sector procurement, do you think that sustainable procurement is possible?
I think it is possible, but perhaps not adequate. So again, where we're able to when processes are flexible, for us to introduce objective, remember there's this, and again, because I've been out of the public space maybe for the past 9 months, Maybe I don't speak the language as much as, or I'm not as close as I used to be, but I remember the issue of perhaps objective criteria, right? Which you find in the procurement language. Maybe that's something that we can use when we're talking sustainable procurement. If there is an objective that we want to drive, if perhaps the objective at this time is about sustainable procurement, I think if that provision is written well enough and supports us, those are some of the provisions and that we may be able to use, or perhaps over and above that, use our internal organizational policies to drive sustainable procurement, where we can link it with objective criteria. Is it enough? My answer is no. But then is it doable, which is your question? The answer is yes.
Thank you for that. I'm going to now put David Ngazimbi on the spot. He's put quite an extensive question in the chat box, and ask him if you'd like to just share that particular question. So taking himself off mic.
Thank you. My question was on looking at sustainable procurement. We'll be talking about the society in large. With the recent cases whereby a lot of issues have been raised on the vaccines, which were not up to standards across Africa, not only in South Africa or in Zimbabwe, but some countries we heard stories about those issues. How how can Africa be able to, or what strategies can they use so that they're able to curb the issue to do with the poor products which have affected, especially during this time of COVID? Probably COVID has exposed more of these issues. We didn't know about that, about the issues of poor drugs, because we never had a situation like COVID before. But because COVID exposed us in such scenarios, what strategies can we use as organizations to curb such kind of issues so that they do not recur?
So David, I'm going to answer your question in twofold. So number one, if I knew that answer, if I can, I'll be paid for that answer. I'll be charging a very huge amount to say, come this way. And you're talking Africa. So I'm trying to add the lightness in this. And again, understanding your question is very relevant. Remember when I started, I said, there's so many things that have gone wrong. There's so many things that have exposed us, but there's so many things that have also showed us that procurement is important. So I'm applying this light side of things to say, that answer, let the governments come, we can negotiate. Whether I can tell how to do it or not, it's another thing. But perhaps let's go back to, on a serious note, let's go back to just the basic procurement 101. If I walk into a procurement department and you say, I want to buy, so in my organization, I always use an example of a stapler. So let's take it to the basic, right? So your problem is vaccines have expired, poor quality, all of these things. And the question is, how do we apply a simple example to a big problem like that? So I always make an example to say, if you're buying a stapler and you're buying it for an organization, okay, I work for a green bag, but now I've got red in my background. Let's talk about red tonight. So I want to buy a stapler that fits in with my glasses, and I would not accept anything but a red stapler. That's the basic thing that I'm looking for. So now if I send out bid responses or bid requests, anything that does not match that red stapler will not meet my requirements. So one, there must have been a specification process in place that says red stapler of the certain quality, number one. Number two, when the responses come back and they are proposing something else, there must be a process that tests whether what we're getting is correct, David. So I'm trying to diagnose a big problem and say, what could have gone wrong in the process? Were the right specifications communicated? Because we also understand that there might be a time where somebody wants a stapler tomorrow, right? And you need to get it any other how, it could be any stapler. But if we have specified what we require, and there is a process that can test whether what's coming from the market is exactly what we require. I mean, they have in the procurement process, David, we can have samples, for instance. Our procurement process allows us to do that, to say, let us, as part of this process for assessment, submit some samples so that we can see that indeed what you are selling to us is what we require. Whether that process was followed in the problem that you're stating, I don't know. I'm just asking. So I'm just putting an example so that we can maybe go back and say, where could the problem have been? Before we even talk about, I spoke about the fact that you might want the stapler and you might want it tomorrow. Did we even ask the right people? Or did we just go, Dr. Nteta, do you speak vaccines? And she's like, yeah, I'm a doctor. I'll submit a bid. Right? So did we ask the right people? So we need to, so there's certain checks in the procurement process that will, and again, to your question, to say, what are the things that we can do? What are the strategies that we can do to make sure that we don't fall into the same step? One, make sure that we understand that the procurement process has got relevant quality control checks. Is the specification right? Are we inviting the right kind of suppliers? Do we know that these suppliers can provide the services? If they can't, is there a process that can allow us to test their sample? Is there a process that can allow us to go to their site to check where they manufacture? Right? Is there a process that can allow us? So before we even get to the Dr. Nteta, who's the doctor but does not speak vaccination, have we checked the accreditation? Did we even specify who are we talking to? Right? So as we check the process, was it the right accreditation? Was it at the right site? Was it the right quantities? You know, what was the process? What is the team? How is it going to be delivered? When is it going to be delivered? Is it the right for the context? I spoke about the context, right? Is it even right for that context that we're buying in? And that's why, I mean, we start hearing conversation about, and I don't speak vaccines as much. I'm a doctor, yes, but I don't speak vaccines to say, okay, there is a vaccine that works when in certain areas because of temperature. You know, those are some of the mechanisms that go into a whole procurement process where we then ultimately can also get through the right governance channels, and then we can get to the process that says, yes, indeed, this is a supplier that works. And again, with the example of a stapler, David, is that sometimes you might find when the market comes back, there is a supplier that charges me 7 rands, and then there's a supplier that charges me 10 rands. And it's easy to assume that perhaps the 10 rand, the one who's charging 10 is the best supplier. But as we unpack the cost model, so I always say the reason procurement is a science. There is a science. There is a method to this madness. There's a science, and if you fall and you allow yourself to fall with this, in love with this science, then you realize that I can actually also unpack cost models where I can separate to say, okay, yes, 10 rands, but then you know what, actually the price of, if I were to single out the stapler costs 5 rands. So the 7 rand is not necessarily cheaper. And then people will always say, yeah, procurement, you always go for the cheaper price. There is a science that we put everything, and then at the end, it then gives you the right item that you're looking for. So that is the process, David. That's the thinking process to say this is possibly what could have gone wrong in the process.
Thank you very much for that response. I'm going to then just give, and I'm prophesizing here when I say this, the future Dr. Melissa Zibusiso to just provide a bit more context to her question that talks about, are there procurement decisions that are made on sustainability terms? Because she's working on her PhD research and she's realizing that there's a dearth in this information out there. So the future Dr. Melissa, could you just take yourself off mic and just provide some context to your question? Perhaps she's no longer in the room.
Okay.
So I would say her question was just basically, are they procurement decisions that are made on sustainability terms?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And perhaps to Melissa's, what might help Melissa is, again, I'm not saying my PhD research had everything, but what I know for sure is I wrote on the subject of sustainable procurement. So there's a lot of information there. And again, perhaps this is scanty information, but what I suspect is you need to define what sustainability is. So I spoke about economic, environment, and social. Dr. Ayanda, now I got those three pillars: economic, environmental, and social. So if you look at the social element, for instance, that's where we find a preferential procurement. So if you have then defined sustainability or sustainable procurement, then you can go further and say, okay, if sustainability or sustainable procurement refers to these three pillars, and I can locate preferential procurement out of under social, then yes, then there are decisions that are made on sustainability terms. Okay. But again, Melissa, I'm putting my hand up. You can find me on my, I think my LinkedIn inbox might be the best method for you if you need to consult. Maybe at a fee, I'm joking. But if you need to speak, we can discuss.
Okay, no, thank you. And I'll say that she won't charge you, Melissa, because you're doing a PhD and she has a passion for women doing their PhD. So I know she won't charge you. I'm noting the time, it's 5 minutes before the end of the session. I just want to give an opportunity to anyone who'd like to ask a question by taking themselves off the mic, or if they feel that I have not attended to your question, which is in the chat, I'll give you an opportunity to do so. Okay. If there are no more questions, and I will take it, it also means that I have attended to all your questions in the chat. Just to give you some feedback on the chats, Dr. Faith, is that there's really been some resounding, thank you very much, very insightful, really some positive feedback in terms of your presentation, much appreciation for it. And I would just like to take this opportunity to echo that as well. On behalf of AISCA, for coming through and sharing your insights, really practical insights, answering all those quite tough questions.
I thought you were going to help me.
No, you handled them very, very well. And I'd also like to just to thank the team that sits behind me, the AISCA team as well, to say thank you very much for all your support. And also thanking the participants, because you've made it engaging. We are also learning, as I'm sure Dr. Faith, like myself, also learning from the questions and the debate and the engagement, really appreciating that as well, and the questions that are coming in the chat. So really, thank you very much. I'm going to finally just allow Dr. Faith for just maybe a minute, last words that you would like to share with the audience this evening. Over to you, Dr. Faith.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Nteta. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I mean, when Prof said it was going to be 1 hour, 30 minutes, I didn't think I would survive, but I'm looking at the time. So it's 3 minutes before the 90 minutes. So I'm grateful that I was able to stand in the boxing ring for this long. But overall, what an insightful discussion. Like I said, when I was putting this together, and then again, trying to recall the time, talking from experience, I realized that there is value in our experiences. I think sometimes we underestimate what we go through, and we think, you know what, I'm just a procurement professional in the back office. Maybe I never appreciated. But if we start contextualizing what all these learnings and this experience means, and it could be in any other environment really, because I don't think it's just procurement professionals on the call tonight, that we should learn to appreciate these experiences. We should learn to frame our questions differently, and we should also just keep hope alive. I want to also maybe take a moment to think about everybody who has been affected, infected, and all those who lost their lives during this time. It is a very different time with lots of uncertainty, but I think that we need to just take each day as it comes and see how we can contribute. And if our names are also on the roll call tomorrow, you know, we should be able to be proud to say, you know what, we used our time, we used our voices to add and contribute to a very insightful conversation, a very relevant and necessary conversation during this time. So I'm really, really grateful to the ASCA team and to Prof and everybody, and to you. Well done on facilitating the session so well. Thank you so, so much. This was quite good. Thank you for all the positive feedback. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
With that, I will release everyone to go and cook supper. Start their evening, and that's everybody on the call. Very much, and hope to see you again at the next Game Changer series. We'll be sending you out invitations in due course, and hope you'll be able to join us. So thank you, and thanks, Dr. Mashele. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Docs. Thanks, Docs. We're looking forward to the invite again.
Thank you, Godfrey.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Hello, Bennett.
Bye.
Oh my
Good
gosh,
Thank you, Dr.
bye-bye.
Mashele. Thank you, Dr. Tedda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Goodbye,
Chair. Thank you,
Hey,
Chair.
Malaika, hello, bye-bye. Bye.
Doctor, watch how you go, Pili.
How woman, it's a minute before.
It's about 2:07. It's only 7:30 now. You're not at 2:07.
I can make better of it. Thank you.
Keep well, bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.
Bye, Hassani. Doc, I can log off. Thanks, eh?
Yes, you can log off.
Yeah, we'll connect on the
once
other
again,
side.
Yes, we'll connect on the other side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.